Zui TV.
A happy, whirring sound filled the air. It was the sound of an important operation underway. Zui woke up from his afternoon nap and followed the sound, his little feet pattering softly on the floor. It led him straight to the kitchen, a place that always smelled of sweet promises and warm adventures. His mom was there, holding a big metal whisk, stirring a bowl of fluffy, white ingredients. The batter was thick and smooth, like a cloud in a bowl, and it swirled around the bowl like a gentle river. She was on a very important mission, baking a special, rainbow cake for a friend's birthday party. The kitchen looked like a busy, wonderful laboratory, with bowls and spoons and jars all around, ready for action. Zui knew he had to help. This was a mission for a super helper. He ran to his toy box and grabbed his brightest red spoon. It was his special tool, and it was time to join the adventure. The first task was the ingredient hunt. Mom held up a recipe card with clear pictures of the things they needed: a big white sack, a carton of milk, and a shiny jar of sugar. To the pantry, she declared with a playful smile. Zui's job was to find them. He became a brave explorer, his eyes darting around the kitchen like a little hummingbird. He looked high and low, his mind focused on the mission. He peeked inside the pantry, a land of tall shelves and secret treasures, and there it was. A big, heavy white sack on a high shelf, just like on the card. It was a little too heavy for him to lift, but he pointed with a triumphant smile, and his mom pulled down the sack of flour. Bingo! Next, he spotted the milk carton in the fridge, giving a little shiver as the cool air inside rushed out. He grabbed it with both hands, feeling the coldness. Found it, finally. He saw the shiny sugar jar on the counter, sparkling like a mountain of diamonds. Zui proudly brought each ingredient to the kitchen table, feeling like a true hero. The ingredient hunt was a total success. Next came the great mixing adventure. Mom poured the white flour into a big bowl, making a soft, powdery snowdrift. Zui got to add the sugar, which made a pleasant sound as it poured. Then he helped pour in the cold milk. His mom gently helped him stir the mixture with the big whisk. The batter became a creamy, dreamy swirl of white, getting thicker and thicker. Zui watched as his mom divided the fluffy cake batter into smaller bowls. She squeezed tiny drops of red, yellow, and blue food coloring into each bowl. Zui became the color mixer, stirring the bowls one by one with his red spoon. He stirred the red bowl until it was bright and bold like a strawberry. He stirred the yellow bowl until it looked like sunshine on a happy day. And he stirred the blue until it was as deep as the sky on a perfect afternoon. He stirred with all his might, watching the colors swirl and transform, mixing the white batter into something truly magical. He had made a beautiful rainbow potion, ready for the next step. After the mixing came the big bake-off. Zui and his mom carefully poured each colorful batter layer into a round cake pan. They poured the red layer first, making a vibrant red circle, then the yellow layer on top, and finally the blue, making a beautiful rainbow tower right inside the pan. Together, with Zui's little hands on the side of the pan, they pushed it into the warm, glowing oven. A wave of heat rushed out, but Zui felt safe next to his mom. Zui's eyes were glued to the little window in the door. He watched and watched, pointing to the clock as the cake slowly grew bigger and taller. He saw the red layer puff up like a tiny pillow, then the yellow, and then the blue. It was like watching a magic trick right before his eyes. A warm, sweet smell began to fill the kitchen, the most wonderful smell in the world. He waited patiently, imagining the delicious cake inside. Finally, the most exciting part of all, decorating the castle. The cake was out of the oven, cool and ready. Mom spread creamy white frosting all over the outside of the cake, making it look like a smooth, snowy mountain. Zui's eyes lit up. He was in charge of the sprinkles. He grabbed a jar of rainbow sprinkles and became the sparkle dust sprinkler. He carefully shook the sprinkles over the top, making a sparkly rain of colors. He made a star shape with little silver candies right in the middle. The cake went from a simple cake to a beautiful, sparkling rainbow castle, ready for a celebration. As the sun began to turn the sky a beautiful mix of pink and orange, casting a soft, warm glow through the window, Zui and his mom sat together and looked at their creation. Mom carefully placed the finished rainbow castle in a box with a clear lid, ready to be delivered to her friend. She gave Zui a big, warm hug that felt like a comfy blanket. She told him,
"Thank you for being the best super helper and color mixer a mom could ask for."
They had worked together as a team to make something wonderful. Zui's heart was full of warmth and love, knowing that helping his mom build a rainbow castle was the most delicious and exciting adventure of all.
Zui TV.
On Zui's little workbench sat gears, springs, shiny buttons, and a pair of very curious shoes. Each heel had a tiny clock face. The hands spun as if they were thinking. Zui loved to build and test things. He slipped on the shoes, tied the bright red laces, and stood tall. The shoes felt warm, like a friendly hug. He tapped one heel. The floor turned to soft sand. A salty breeze kissed his cheeks. Seashells dotted the shore. A giant dragonfly buzzed past, wings like glass. The clocks on his heels glowed pale blue. Zui had traveled in time. He balanced at the water's edge. Small fish zipped by. Beyond tall ferns, something huge moved, slow and careful. Not a monster, just a long-necked reptile in a lagoon. This world was very old. Zui breathed in. He didn't need big words to understand. Life learns little by little. Pink and gold sky. Thud, thud, soft and steady. A herd of woolly mammoths crossed a wide field. curved tusks shone like moons. A small calf stumbled and then found its feet, staying close to its mother. The herd moved like a big family. When the wind rose, elders formed a circle around the young. Zui walked beside them for a while, feeling the rhythm of the past. The lesson was clear: protect the small, travel together. Snowflakes swirled. People in fur and soft leather crouched by a fire, patient and careful. One rubbed a stick on a wooden board. Smoke, then glow. Dry grass, gentle breath, and the fire grew. Another shaped a spear tip with a stone blade, working like an artist. They shared food, tools, and smiles. Zui watched and learned, people are strongest when they help. A busy market. Bowls of spices, bright cloth, a puppet show. Drummers tapped a dancing rhythm. A potter spun clay. The pot took shape, no trick, just practice. Hands learn by doing. A classroom filled with sunlight. Chalk dust floated like snow. Children wrote on slate boards. A teacher rolled down a map. A model of the solar system spun, planets circling a glowing sun. Curiosity turned into pictures, pictures into ideas, ideas into answers. Questions were bridges across time. A windy coast. Tall wooden ships creaked in a harbor. People unloaded boxes marked with strange symbols. A girl peered through a brass telescope. A comet smudged the blue sky. She checked an old star book and wrote a note, "Remember to look up." Zui kept that note in his heart. A hospital with soft voices and gentle hands. Doctors checked heartbeats. Nurses rolled a cart with a glowing screen that mapped the inside of a body. A child hugged a stuffed bear while a nurse placed a star-shaped bandage. Technology helped. A hill over a quiet desert. Windmills turned slowly. Kids in bright hats tested little weather stations. One pressed a button, wing numbers blinked on a screen. Another flew a diamond-shaped kite. She wrote data in a notebook, simple numbers, excited hand. Night on a mountain of telescopes. Domes opened like blinking eyes. Stars poured across the dark like sugar on velvet. A giant mirror turned. A screen showed a spiral galaxy, arms curled like a seashell. A scientist pointed to a tiny dot. Planets around a faraway star appeared. Zui felt very small and very big at once, small in the universe, big with wonder. A classroom again, but this time, students taught. One showed how to code a tiny robot to follow a black line. Another launched a straw rocket with vinegar and baking soda, whoosh. A third drew a food chain, sun to plant, plant to bug, bug to bird. Zui helped a little one line up her rocket. Teaching made learning stick like glue. A park with tree signs. Each sign had a leaf picture and a few simple words. Zui touched the bark, rough, then smooth. By the river, a woman tested water and smiled when it ran clear through a tube. Nearby, a boy made a simple filter from a bottle, stones, sand, and charcoal. Dirty water in, clean water out. The river sparkled. Care for your home, and it cares for you. His room returned. The workbench waited, screws shining like stars. The shoes warmed his feet and quieted. The clock faces went still. Zui slipped the shoes off and set them on the bench. The shoes rested on the workbench, quiet and proud.
Zui TV.
Zui held a shiny ticket with his name on it and a tiny airplane picture. Today, he wouldn't throw a paper plane. Today, he would ride a real one. The airport felt like a bright, buzzing hive. Luggage rolled by like tiny cars. Signs glowed with letters and arrows. A little cart beeped as it drove past, and people in yellow vests waved. Zui watched closely. He moved with the crowd to a place where trays slid along a belt. He placed his bag in a tray, stepped through a quiet doorway that hummed, lifted his arms like a starfish, and then lowered them when the friendly guard nodded. Past the checkpoint, a giant window opened to the world outside. Airplanes waited like resting birds. Some had bright shapes on their tails. Some had round, curious noses. Zui pressed his palm to the glass. A plane rolled along painted lines, following paths like secret maps. A worker guided it with orange wands. Zui copied the motions with his arms and smiled. It felt like a dance. At the gate, people sat with bags and books. A calm voice invited families with small children to board.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention, please?
Zui stood, felt a little wobble in his knees, and steadied himself. The jet bridge was a gray tunnel with a tiny echo. A friendly person at the entrance smiled with their eyes and showed him down the aisle. Zui nodded. He could feel the welcome without any words. Inside, the plane was neat and narrow. Soft seats lined up in rows. Zui found his seat by reading letters and numbers, a small treasure hunt that led him to the window. He slid into the seat and clicked his belt. The wings stretched outside like a white arm, the tip curling up like a wave. A truck with a hose fed the wing from below. Fuel, he decided, airplane food. Another truck lifted suitcases into the plane's belly. People worked together like parts of a clock, small jobs making a big job go. A soft chime sounded. A light above showed a small seatbelt shape. A person in a neat uniform stood in the aisle and showed how to be safe. Their hands told a quiet story. Zui watched carefully. Learning could be a dance. The plane pushed back with help from a little truck. It turned and rolled toward a long, open runway. The engines hummed. The entire plane shivered, like a cat before a jump. Zui pressed his palm to the window and thought a brave thought. Up is a kind of forward. The plane began to run. A gentle push pressed into his back. Then the wheels whispered off the ground. The city slipped away, and the world rearranged itself into tiny shapes. Roads became ribbons, houses became blocks, and cars became shiny dots. Zui's belly fluttered like a small bird, then settled as the plane found its breath. He smiled without sound and leaned toward the glass. The wing flexed like something alive. Small flaps slid and tucked, up and down, gentle and sure. 4 words from a book rose in his mind: lift, drag, thrust, wait. Here they were, like friends holding hands. Clouds gathered, first thin wisps, then soft pillows, and then a wide, white field. The plane sailed into a tunnel of cotton. For a heartbeat, everything outside was white. Then they burst into blue so bright he squinted. The horizon drew a clear line where the sky met the world. The wing traced small shadows across the cloud tops. Far below, a river flashed like a silver snake. A cart rolled quietly down the aisle. Wheels whispered, cups clinked, and the friendly person with smiling eyes offered him a small juice and a cookie. He held them like treasures, taking tiny sips and bites as he looked out at the wide, bright day. Light shifted as the plane turned. The sun became a warm coin resting on the wing. A soft voice announced they would land soon. A gentle tug pulled at Zui's thoughts, a mix of wanting a little more and feeling almost there. The plane tilted and began to descend. The engine's song softened. The ground rose to meet them. The wings' flaps opened like careful fingers. Wheels folded down with a quiet thump. The runway swelled ahead. The air felt thick. The plane stopped at the gate. A chime sounded. The little seatbelt light went dark. He gave the window a small, thankful tap and stepped into the jet bridge, then back into the bright, bustling airport. The same hive as before, but now it felt friendly and known. By another wide window, he found a quiet bench and opened his sketchbook again. He drew the landing as he felt it, flaps opening like fingers, wheels touching down like commas in a long sentence, the runway steady and careful beneath. He closed the book and tucked it away. Outside, another airplane lifted into the sky, smooth as a kite on a steady wind. Zui raised his hand and made a tiny wave. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a hello again, the kind you give to something you plan to see many times.
Zui TV.
The blue fish-shaped ticket felt cool in Zui's hand. The doors slid open and cool, bluish air brushed his face. Inside, the light was alive, shimmering and rippling across the walls like he had stepped under a giant moving wave. The first thing Zui saw was a towering glass wall.
Wow!
Behind it, hundreds of silver fish darted together in perfect waves. They twisted left, every fish turned left. They whipped right, every fish turned right. They moved like one giant, glittering ribbon. Zui pressed his palm to the glass.
Oh my God!
The fish swept past in a flash of moonlight. The path curved into a green, forest-like room. A turtle with a shell patterned like a map basked under warm light, blinking slowly. On a leaf, a small green frog sat perfectly still. Its throat puffed out like a tiny balloon, then shrank again. Then, suddenly, water was above him. A tunnel of glass wrapped around his path. A small sand shark slid by with steady, quiet eyes. Silver bubbles climbed to the surface like strings of pearls. On the sandy bottom below, a crab scuttled sideways, then shuffled into a rocky hole. Around the next bend, the room glowed purple and blue. Jellyfish drifted in their tall glass homes. Long threads trailed softly behind them. They looked like living lanterns floating in the dark. Next came a reef bursting with color. Yellow fish as bright as lemons darted between coral towers. Blue fish shimmered like bits of sky. Orange fish glowed like tiny suns. A clownfish peeked out from the soft swaying arms of a sea anemone. Zui leaned close to see tiny coral branches, each one alive. They weren't plants, they were tiny animals, building stone homes together. On the sandy floor, a goby fish hovered at the mouth of a tunnel while a little shrimp worked, scooping sand away. Zui grinned. They were the smallest builders and guards he'd ever seen. The air turned warmer in the river life hall. Leaves floated on the water's surface, thick roots dangled down like ropes. A long, spotted garfish hovered straight and still, its nose like a spear. A turtle paddled lazily past, legs moving like slow oars. On one wall, Zui saw a picture of a fish ladder, steps of flowing water that helped fish leap past big dams. He imagined them jumping, one splash at a time, until they reached their home. Further on, voices hummed around a shallow touch pool. Sea stars, shaped like red and orange cookies, lay on the bottom. A guide smiled and showed how to touch with just 2 gentle fingers. Zui's fingertips met the cool water, then the bumpy top of a starfish. Grainy like sand pressed into soft clay. Water dripped from his hand in thin silver threads. In the dim seagrass room, a leafy sea dragon floated among green fronds, its frilly body blending in perfectly. Nearby, a tiny seahorse clung to a strand of grass with its tail. Its whole body was the shape of a question mark, and Zui could just see its heart beating in its see-through skin.
Beautiful!
The wide ocean window came next, a glass wall so big it felt like looking into another world. Rays glided in lazy circles. Black-tipped reef sharks cruised past with smooth, powerful tails. From somewhere behind the glass, a diver swam into view and waved. Streams of silver bubbles rose from their mask like a waterfall turned upside down. In the floor, a round glass porthole showed garden eels poking up from sandy holes. They swayed like tall grass in the current, each keeping half its body tucked below. When a shadow passed, they zipped down in a blink, then slowly rose again when it was safe. Another tank glowed golden. Fat, slow fish drifted in the gentle current. A turtle floated to the surface for a sip of air, then sank down to nibble on green plants. A big catfish swept its long whiskers across the sand, searching for a snack. Near the end, a small science lab peeked through a window. People wearing white coats measured the water with glass tubes. Numbers glowed on screens: pH, temperature, salinity, the secret recipe for making the tanks feel like home for their fish. Another display showed tiny fish eggs under a microscope, small clear beads with tiny dots inside. A video nearby showed divers planting coral pieces back into the ocean, bit by bit growing new reefs. Just before the exit, Zui found a tall round tank swirling with fish in brilliant colors: bright yellow, deep blue, fiery red, shining silver.
Look at that!
In the center, a column of bubbles climbed straight to the surface, each one racing the others to the top. But it was the final window that made Zui stop.
That is unbelievable!
The water was soft pink and deep blue, and a single moon jelly floated there. Its bell bloomed, then shrank, then bloomed again, slow and steady. When he stepped back outside, the sun was bright and warm. But in his eyes was the silver dance of fish ribbons, the purple glow of jellyfish lanterns, and the tiny, steady heartbeat of a seahorse. The ocean was still moving in him, cool and wide and alive.
See you tomorrow!
Zui TV.
Zui stepped outside with his little backpack bouncing on his shoulders. The world looked extra bright today, as if it was waiting for him. He rubbed his eyes once and gasped. Colors seemed to shine stronger, louder, fuller, as if each one wanted to tell him a secret. The first thing he saw was a red kite flying high in the sky.
Wow!
Its tail fluttered in the wind like a dancing ribbon. Zui thought, red feels strong and brave. It was the color of apples at the market and the roses in his neighbor's garden. It told him to keep his head up and move forward boldly. By the roadside, a cart stood piled with juicy oranges. The seller handed one to a laughing boy. Zui watched the orange skin peel away to reveal juicy, glowing slices. Orange felt cheerful, like friends sharing a laugh or the warmth of the evening sun. He walked into the park, and a patch of tall yellow sunflowers caught his eye. They turned their heads together toward the shining sun. Yellow was bright, warm, and full of energy. It was the color of corn on the cob, ripe bananas, and happy balloons. A little further, the grass stretched wide and green. Birds hopped along the lawn, pecking at seeds. Green was everywhere, on the trees, bushes, vines, and tiny sprouts pushing up from the soil. Zui bent down and touched the soft blades of grass. Green felt like a pillow for tired eyes and a fresh start for everything that grows. He followed the path to the edge of a small lake. It rippled under the sky like a giant mirror. Blue filled the water, reflected from above. Ducks swam in rows, leaving little V-shaped trails behind them. A dragonfly zipped by, flashing shiny blue wings. Blue felt calm and wide, like open air in his lungs. On the far side of the lake, the afternoon shadows grew long. The sky deepened, brushing itself with purple, the color of twilight. Zui saw tiny wildflowers, purple like grape juice, swaying in the breeze. Purple felt thoughtful, mysterious, dreamy, like stars just before they appear. Near a playground, Zui picked up a small stick lying on the ground. The stick was brown, the earthy color of tree trunks, wooden benches, and soft soil underfoot. Brown felt steady, safe, and strong, like the roots holding tall trees upright. It wasn't flashy, but it carried everything important. Beside the swing, a black crow cawed loudly and hopped away. Zui watched its black feathers shine in the light. Black was the night sky, the deep cave, the soft shadows in every corner. It felt powerful and protective. Just then, a butterfly floated by with white wings tipped in silver dots. White was snow he had seen in picture books, the fluffy clouds drifting gently above, and a clean page waiting for a story. White felt pure, quiet, and full of possibilities, like the start of something new. As more butterflies came near, Zui noticed something magical. Their wings weren't just one color. Some were orange and black, some yellow and brown, some blue and white. The world wasn't made of single colors sitting alone.
Beautiful!
Zui opened his sketchbook from his backpack and began to draw what he saw. He drew the red kite, the orange fruit, the yellow sunflowers, the green grass, the blue lake, the purple flowers, the brown stick, the black crow, and the white butterflies. Each page filled with color, until the book looked like a travel map of his day.
That is unbelievable!
Instead of making up rules in his mind, Zui simply walked home letting the colors guide him. When he passed a red flag fluttering on a pole, he straightened his back and lifted his chin, standing tall. At the corner, a yellow balloon bobbed in a child's hand, and Zui's lips curled into a quiet smile that matched its bounce. By the park wall, green leaves swayed in the wind, and he drew in a long, deep breath, feeling fresh and calm. A little further, a blue feather lay on the ground.
Look at that!
Zui picked it up gently, holding it as if it were a fragile treasure, then set it back down with care before walking on. Colors could guide him, teach him, give him tiny lessons every day. When he reached home, Zui's shoes left dusty prints on his floor. His curtain glowed orange from the evening sun. On his desk, crayons waited like tiny colorful friends. He looked at them differently now. They weren't just tools. They were pieces of the world in his hands. He picked up his red crayon and drew a heart. Then he colored it with orange to make it glow, yellow to make it shine, green to keep it fresh, blue to keep it calm, purple to give it mystery, brown to ground it, black to protect it, and white to leave space to grow. Gold was the color of treasure and hope, shining above everything. Zui leaned back, grinning at the colorful world inside his book. He whispered,
Colors are more than shades on a canvas. They are the taste of ripe fruit, the shine of morning light, the calm of a cool river, and the excitement of adventure.
The window breeze swayed his curtain, carrying the smell of fresh grass, the golden slice of evening, and all the colors of his day. Zui closed his sketchbook gently and knew tomorrow would bring more colors waiting to be found.
See you tomorrow!
Zui TV.
Drums rolled. Lights twinkled. A red and gold tent rose like a giant crown at the edge of the fairground. Zui stepped under the striped entrance, eyes wide. The air smelled like popcorn, sweet candy, and a little bit of sawdust. A bell rang, and the show began. Inside, the big top glowed with soft golden light.
Wow!
The ring was a circle of smooth sand. Ropes hung high in the air like silver lines to the stars. Flags fluttered. A band in bright jackets played a happy tune, while the audience clapped. A tall ringmaster in a black coat and shiny top hat swept into the ring. He held a red ribbon stick and pointed to the sky. A spotlight clicked on. High above, two trapeze swings rocked gently. Acrobats in sparkling suits flew through the air. One leaped, whoosh, hands catching wrists, feet catching feet. They spun and smiled, landing safely on a soft net. The crowd gasped, then cheered. Zui's heart bounced with the drums. Clowns tumbled in, shoes squeaking. One had a tiny hat that kept falling off, another rode a unicycle and pretended to wobble, but never really did. A clown pulled a very long scarf from his sleeve, longer, 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 until it made a colorful snake across the sand. Zui giggled as they bowed and tripped and bowed again. The lights dimmed to a deep blue. A ring of small torches flickered like stars on the ground. A dancer stepped into the ring holding two glowing ribbons. She spun them in slow circles. Then came fire. Careful hands tossed fire batons, up, around, catch, smooth and sure. A soft hush fell over the tent. The flames made warm halos on the dancers' cheeks. When the last flame went out with a little kiss of smoke, the tent filled with gentle claps, then big cheers. The tightrope walker climbed a small ladder and stood on a wire high above the ring. She carried a long balance pole. Her feet found the wire like it was a thin path across a pond. She turned slowly in the middle, bent one knee, and, oh, stood on one foot. The crowd held its breath. She smiled and finished with a brave, tiny jump to the platform. The band burst into a happy song again. Down below, two strong performers rolled in a barrel the size of a table. They lifted it as if it were light as a balloon. One raised a shiny barbell. His arms trembled a little, then steadied. He set it down with careful control, like placing a sleeping cat. The lesson was quiet and clear: strength is careful, not rough. A pair of ribbon silks dropped from the roof like twin waterfalls. Two acrobats wrapped themselves in the fabric and climbed. They spun into spirals and floated down, the silks blooming like flower petals. They stopped a breath above the sand and slipped softly to their feet. Zui's fingers curled on the edge of his seat, then relaxed when they landed. The band switched to a playful tune. A seal-shaped puppet on wheels balanced a ball on its nose and rolled past, wagging a felt tail, making the little ones in the crowd laugh and clap.
Beautiful!
A magician followed, tipping a striped hat. He reached in and pulled out colored scarves, a paper bouquet, and then, pop, a small paper dove that fluttered on a thread. He bowed and tipped the hat again. Confetti flew out like tiny stars.
That is unbelievable!
Outside the ring, carts rattled by with treats. Popcorn popped and jumped in a silver drum. Cotton candy spun into pink clouds that looked like tiny sunsets. A lemonade stand poured yellow rivers into cups with big straws. Zui licked a dot of sugar from his thumb and turned back to the ring. The ringmaster lifted his ribbon stick and pointed to a small door. A miniature car rolled in, so small it looked like a toy.
Look at that!
One clown got out. Then another. Then another and another, until the sand was full of clowns waving little flags. They lined up and made a silly parade, stepping high, knees up, knees down, hats bobbing like birds. Then came a quiet act. A mime in white gloves and a striped shirt walked into the ring with an imaginary box. He pushed. He pulled. He leaned on nothing and sat on air. He pretended to climb an invisible ladder and peeked at the top of a pretend wall. The tent filled with smiles. A spotlight moved to a round hoop set high. A hoop artist spun it around her arm, then her waist, then 3 hoops, then 5, all glittering. The hoops climbed to her shoulders and slid down again, never falling. She made them move like rings around a tiny planet. The band grew soft again. A sand artist rolled in a glass table with a light underneath. On a big screen above the ring, the sand became pictures under the artist's moving hands. First a circus tent, then a moon, then a laughing clown face that turned into a starry night. The drawings flowed from one to the next like a dream. Zui felt his eyes shine. Art could be made from anything, even tiny grains of sand.
See you tomorrow!
Zui TV.
The bright rainbow colors in the sky started to dance and swirl like cotton candy in a giant mixer. Down below, Zui was chasing colorful butterflies through a field of singing flowers when something sparkly caught his eye. A golden egg with swirling purple spots was floating just above the tallest sunflower, spinning slowly like a magical music box.
Wow!
The egg began to glow brighter and brighter, making tiny bell sounds that tickled Zui's ears. Suddenly, it zoomed down and gently bumped into his hands. The moment Zui touched it, the whole world around him turned into a kaleidoscope of amazing colors.
This is so colorful! This is huge!
Trees became candy canes, clouds turned into fluffy marshmallows, and the ground beneath his feet felt like bouncy trampolines. The magic egg started to grow warm in Zui's hands, and beautiful sparkles began floating out of it like tiny dancing stars. Each sparkle that touched something made it come alive in the most wonderful way. Rocks started rolling around like playful puppies, flowers began to giggle and sway to invisible music, and even the wind started painting pictures in the air with invisible brushes. Zui felt a tickly feeling in his tummy, like when you go down a really big slide. The egg was pulling him up into the sky. But he wasn't scared at all. Instead, he felt like he was floating on a cloud made of happiness. As they soared higher, Zui could see that the world below looked like a giant patchwork quilt made of every color imaginable. The egg carried Zui to a place where the sky met a sea of liquid silver. Here, other magical eggs were floating around like boats on water.
Huh, that is so cute!
Some eggs were covered in tiny mirrors that reflected rainbow lights, others had soft fur that looked like baby chicks, and some even had little wings that flapped gently in the breeze. But Zui's egg was different.
That is unbelievable!
It started to crack open with the sound of tiny Christmas bells ringing. Inside, there wasn't a baby bird or a dragon like in fairy tales. Instead, there was a glowing seed that looked like a miniature sun. The seed jumped out and landed in Zui's palm, making his whole hand glow with warm, golden light. The moment the seed touched Zui's skin, he understood something amazing. The egg had chosen him because his heart was full of kindness and wonder. The seed began to sprout right there in his hand, growing into a tiny tree with leaves that changed colors like a fast-moving sunset. Each leaf that fell from the little tree turned into something beautiful. Some became butterflies, others became soap bubbles filled with tiny rainbows, and some turned into paper boats that sailed away on invisible rivers in the air. As Zui watched in amazement, the tiny tree kept growing, but not bigger, it grew more magical. Its roots reached down and tickled his fingers, while its branches stretched up and started picking star-shaped fruits from the air itself.
Beautiful!
The fruits tasted like birthday cake, ice cream, and sunshine all mixed together. The tree began to sing a wordless song that made Zui feel like he was the luckiest boy in all the worlds that ever existed. Other children started appearing from behind silver clouds, all holding their own magical eggs and riding on shooting stars. They all gathered around Zui's tree, and together they discovered that when all their magical eggs' powers combined, they could paint the whole sky with their dreams. Zui's tree suddenly sprouted a swing made of moonbeams, and as he swung back and forth, he scattered seeds of joy everywhere. Each seed that fell created something wonderful, a new playground, a field of chocolate flowers, a lake filled with liquid laughter that made everyone giggle just by looking at it.
Look at that!
The other children joined in, and soon they were all swinging from branch to branch of a giant tree that had grown from all their combined magic. The tree was so big that its leaves brushed against the stars, and its roots reached down to tickle the earth below. Every time they laughed together, new branches grew, creating more swings, slides, and secret hideouts among the clouds. As the adventure continued, Zui realized that the magic egg hadn't just chosen him randomly. It had been waiting for someone who believed that magic was everywhere, hiding in ordinary moments like chasing butterflies and watching clouds. The egg had seen into Zui's heart and found someone who understood that the best magic happens when it's shared with friends. The golden tree began to glow even brighter, and suddenly, tiny doors appeared all along its trunk. Behind each door was a new adventure waiting to happen. One led to a land where music grew on trees, another opened to a place where you could swim through clouds, and yet another revealed a world where colors could be eaten like candy. But the most amazing thing of all was that wherever Zui went from that day forward, little sparkles of magic followed him. Not the flashy kind that makes loud noises and bright lights, but the gentle kind that makes ordinary days feel extraordinary. The kind of magic that turns puddles into mirrors showing other worlds, makes shadows dance when nobody's watching, and whispers secrets in the rustling of leaves. The magic egg had chosen wisely, and Zui carried its gift of wonder with him always, sharing it with everyone he met through his bright smile and curious eyes that saw magic hiding everywhere.
See you tomorrow!
Zui TV.